Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Flying Changes Coaching Show. And I'm really pleased to be with Louise Fletcher Chard today. Hi, Louise.
Hi, Jenny. Hi, everybody.
So Louise is someone who believes that you can have it all. And she's set up her life and designed her life to be doing that. So we're going to find out today, Louise, about what drives you, what you've overcome to get where you are today, what you still want, and the things in your life that have happened to you that have been those like pivotal moments. We've all had those, haven't we? Those moments where just look back and think, right, yeah, that was a bit of a catalyst, that one. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Louise, in your own words.
Right. Well, I'm currently 45, and I believe that I was born with a faulty Equus gene, because I can't remember a time when I wasn't obsessed with horses, but I come from a completely non-horsey family, non-outdoorsy, any of those things really, and they could never quite understand what that was really, and why I would do anything in my power to be anywhere near a horse. I was lucky enough to be brought up in the Middle East and came back to the UK when I was 8, and then from that time forward, we lived fairly rurally in a kind of market town situation. So I used to just go and insinuate myself into little yards or anywhere where there were horses and offer to brush them, muck them out, anything just to be near them really, knowing that my family couldn't afford to have a horse. And they wouldn't have known what to do with it or where to get one from anyway. So that was kind of where it all started. One of the biggest turning points at that point in my life, I was fairly average academically and enjoyed school. Nothing really to you wouldn't have put me down as having a big career or any of those things at that point. Let's put it that way. But unfortunately, my father died when I was 13 after a short battle with cancer, and he actually was only 47 himself. And that point was a massive turning point in lots of ways for me, because it made me realise that life's short. He'd worked abroad for many years and felt that he, at the point of retiring, would spend time with us as a family, and then of course was robbed of that. So again, it sharpens the mind about, life is an incredibly short journey and you've got to make the most out of it. So I became quite focused then on wanting to get more involved with horses. My mum, after a lot of persuasion from her friends, in the end gave me 750 quid to go and buy a horse. So that's what I did, and I made some mistakes, and I bought the standard kind of slightly doped up version of the nice horse that you really wanted, and then had the really hard aspect of then I had to resell it through the market, because Mum said to me, well, you either keep this one, there's no more money, so you either keep this one or you have to sell it. So sort of 14 I probably was at the time, that's quite a big decision really to actually go through that. And my mum has always made me incredibly independent, so that was my thing to do, and I sorted it all out and I did it. And I actually ended up buying a couple of horses, worked on them, didn't know what I was doing at all really, worked on them, sold them on, made a bit of money, realised I was quite entrepreneurial, I suppose, but that wasn't the word that I would use at the time. Now, in order to support my mum, I knew that I had to make money as well as look after the horse. So by the time I was about 15, I had this really brilliant car washing round, and I used to go everywhere all around this local town washing people's cars on their drives. It was £1 for outside and £1 for inside. So that tells you how long ago it was. And I'd do anything it took to be near these horses and to make enough money to look after them and to help my mum through that process. Funnily enough, though, I finished school and I went off to college. I chose to go to a local sixth form college, and that's where the biggest mistake probably happened, because I'd come from quite a small private girls' school, and going off to college in the nearby local town was a whole different ball game to me, and the trauma of losing my dad only really started to emerge at that point. There'd been an ongoing court case. He died of an industrial disease, and that ongoing court case went on for years, and that trauma really came out with the freedom of being in a local college and being exposed to going to the pub, and all those sort of things, boys, all of it really. So at this point I had the horse, but I was going off the rails basically, and I flunked my A levels massively. hugely, 2 U's and an E. So I retook again, and I got a D and 2 E's. And then I fell in love with a traveller, and I ran away from home. So
I'm going to stop you there. That is the point at which wow, I'm going to keep them in suspense for a moment. And then I ran away with a traveller. Right, okay.
I went to the Reading Festival and never came home.
Oh my word, that's amazing. Okay, so clearly, and this is so often the case, isn't it, with entrepreneurs, with people that are driven to really get something, they haven't been handed it on a plate. They have resilience. They've faced adversity. They've learned lessons early on. What lessons do you think, up until the point of going to Reading Festival and never coming home, what lessons do you think you'd been learning that probably are key to your mindset now and the way that you are?
Definitely that hard work pays off, and there were points when I was at school where I used to, you know, promise my mum I definitely tried my best, and I knew I hadn't. And but I now, it's deeply ingrained in me that you work hard, and you know, and I know you can't make everything happen, but I'm very much a person that makes things happen. And you know, really focuses on the end game of it, really, and what I need to do to get to that point. So yeah, that's, you know, that's what I've learned throughout the process.
Okay, right. Okay, so we're going to pick back up then at the point at which you went to Reading Festival and never came home.
So
okay,
I'll paint the picture for you. I had dreadlocks right down my back. I had nose pierced, and you know, like to drink, still like a drink, but probably was a bit off the rails back in the day. So this is 1994, and off I trot to the Reading Festival with my friend. We drive there in a Fiat 125 in a slightly obnoxious brown colour. It takes us 7 hours to get there from Staffordshire, and you know, etc., etc. Get there, meet this guy who is a new age traveller, and absolutely fall head over heels in love with him, and disappear off to his site in Swindon. Now, what I hadn't realised at this point, I was due to start uni, which I'd got a place, but only through clearing. I mean, you know, properly scraping the bottom of the barrel, and I was due to start there in a couple of weeks' time. Anybody that's been to the Reading Festival knows it happens used to happen in August, and so right on the back of that, you'd be going off to uni or going back. And so I went off to live at this traveller's site. I was only there a couple of weeks, and I suddenly thought, I've got this horse at home, and you know, this isn't my life. This isn't what I want at all. This isn't anything like I have visualized for myself. And I love this guy. And actually, it turned out he came from a really good family from Stamford in Lincolnshire, and he was a really lovely guy. So I said to him in the end, look, I'm going to go home and I'm going to go to uni, and you can come and live with me. So you imagine my mum's delight at that. So that's what we did. I went home, I got on the National Express and I went home, and I said to my mum, right, I'm going to start uni. I need to find a house tomorrow because we start the day after tomorrow. So she obviously gathered every morsel of energy she'd got and drove me to Leicester, and we found this house, and it all worked out. And a week later, John turned up with his dog, and and we lived together for the first sort of semester of uni. And everything was fine, and actually really settled into uni life. And I was doing an environmental science degree, which actually did stimulate quite a lot of interest in me, and it was all good. It was great, really nice time. One of the biggest pivotal points for me was that we were going to visit John's family in Stamford. Now, anybody that's been to Stamford, it's a beautiful place, and you have to go through Uppingham, and Uppingham's a very posh market town in Leicestershire. And he'd gone ahead of me, a couple of days ahead of me. So I was on the bus on my own, and I'd got to Uppingham where I needed to change buses, and I was sat at the bus stop in the centre of Uppingham with this dog on my lap, with my dreadlocks and my, you know, tatty clothes, which I thought at the time looked fantastic. And this horse lorry came around the corner, this huge lorry, you know, the stuff of dreams, you know, and the registration on it was Penny 2 or something similar to that. And it went by, and I thought, oh God, you know, that's me. That's what I want. You know, I want to have that. And then, you know, the whole thing of, oh, you'll never get it, and you know how the mind works. So I sat there a bit longer, waiting for the bus, and the next thing, this convertible sports car comes around the corner with this beautiful woman in it, only young, Penny 1 on the registration. And I was like, I'm having that. And with that, I set about completely redesigning my life. John got binned. The dreadlocks came off. I started to knuckle down at uni, and I started to decide that my life was going to be different, and I was going to be akin to Penny.
Amazing. Oh my word. Whoever you are out there,
whoever you are, Penny.
Like, that is incredible. Who else has had like one of those moments? You know, I've had one of those moments where you see something, and you either see yourself like a reflection, or you see something else and you go, I'm not headed towards that. Or that is what I want, or that isn't what I want. Like, you see,
I was on the wrong road,
don't you? That's exactly.
I was completely on the wrong road, and I saw that the road I was on was not going to take me anywhere near. The closest it would get me to where I wanted to be was to work with horses, and I knew I didn't want to do that because I actually realized at that point I needed money. But then that gives you a problem, because I knew at that point immediately to get these things I needed money. And then, so I needed to do something different, and it wasn't just a bit of money. I'd need a lot of money.
Well, to have Penny 1 and 2, you know, that's not
just the registration plates. Well, without the vehicles.
No. That's it. Most people's that registration would cost the same amount as a lorry, wouldn't it? Let's face it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
So I literally knuckled down at uni. I didn't do brilliantly at uni. I nearly got a 2-2 in the end, but you know, I was on the path to flunk it, to be fair, and I didn't really care. That was the other thing, was that Penny 1 and 2 made me realise that I did care, and that actually I wanted this different life. So that really pushed me and spurred me on. And after I'd finished uni, you know, you do the normal kind of jobs where, because you want your proper career to start, but it takes a bit of time. And ultimately, I ended up working for a groundwork trust, which is an environmental charity. And they opened up lots of training to me, and I progressed very quickly. So I started off working for a guy. In fact, he was a director of our business until, unfortunately, he died last year. And he recruited me, and then within 6 months, I was his boss. And now he's one of, you know, the only guys I've ever met that actually helped that to happen. He was never blocking. He was very aspirational for me, and I went right up to the top of that business as far as I could go. And then I was able to get my master's degree in economic regeneration, because that's what we were kind of moving into, less environmental and more regeneration. To be fair to me, it didn't really matter. The content and the subject of what I was doing didn't matter. It was about progressing, and it was about making money, and it was about my ego was getting bigger as well, and I'll come to the curse of that in a minute. So every time I got I'd take risky steps. So I'd go for an interview at another organisation, knowing that my organisation had offered me more money to stay, and I started making those quite risky decisions. And then I went to do this master's degree, and I met my husband Brendan, and actually he's been a very much more calming influence, but he really supports my kind of approach to life. And what's been weird, after 20 years together, he's much more risk taking than I am now. We've kind of swapped our roles. It's quite weird how you morph like that over time. And maybe because I've been a bit bashed and bruised from some of my decisions, has made me a little bit more risk adverse than I used to be. So I used to do all this hustling to try and get where I wanted to be and to make money. And, you know, this will make you laugh. My first job, I earned £11,000. That was the first kind of proper job I had, £11,000 a year. So the first thing I did was go out and buy a car, which cost £10,999.99, and then wondered why I'd got no money. So then I had to get rid of the car and make different decisions. But all this time, my ego was getting bigger and bigger regarding my ability to do a job. I mean, for God's sake, back then I thought, being Prime Minister, that'd be nothing. I mean, now it'd be the worst thing I could ever think about. But at the time, I just thought I was invincible. I could do anything. So I'd kind of finished at the Groundwork Trust. I'd gone to work for a university, and brought them in so much money from the European funding that they thought I was amazing. So from that was my springboard. And I went into social housing. I was an executive director by the time I was 29. And it went on and on like this until we got to 2008. Still happily married, everything going nicely. We just bought the farm where we live now. And my ego got kind of scratched quite a lot in terms of this lady from the private sector who I'd known through my job. Approached me and said, look, we'd like you to come in as a partner in this global management consultancy. and my ego just made me do it, even though I knew it probably wasn't going to be the right decision.
So just
and,
for 2 seconds, I'm going to stop you there, because I know we're getting to another pivotal here, because I know this part of your story. So when you're being driven by your ego, what's it like? How did you know? Because obviously at the time you didn't know, but with reflection you do. So what now? If someone is thinking, oh, this is kind of sounding like my story, I'm in that point now, or that, you know, this going, how might they know?
It was relentless. I was in relentless pursuit of money and power, if I'm honest. And I took, there was nothing I took greater pleasure in than being able to declare that I had an executive level job, and that we'd got money. There was nothing that even horses at the time didn't give me as much pleasure. And I would say that that's when you know things are going wrong, when you're not actually taking pleasure in the thing that you're trying to achieve. You're actually, yes, you should enjoy the process. That absolutely should enjoy the process of getting to your end point. But I almost enjoyed that process more than I enjoyed where I was going to. I'd lost, although I still knew what I wanted to get to, I'd kind of lost all that. So I was never at home. I never saw the horses that I'd actually got. And I never saw my husband. At this point in our lives, we actually decided that I'd always been anti-children, and we decided, oh yeah, we'll give it a go. And then suddenly that never happened. So all these things collided at the same time. And you become obsessive. It's all consuming. So I had these two things that were all consuming: my career, wanting to start a family. And of course, if you're like me and you've been used to making things happen, if something doesn't happen and it's outside of your control, what do? You throw even more energy at it. So you throw even more, and I'm not talking about procedures and things like that. I'm talking about just your mind is focused on it. So suddenly everything I'd wanted, I'd been able to make happen, and then suddenly I wanted a child and I couldn't make it happen. And then, you know, at the same point, I'd got this job which was turning into the most horrifying experience. So all those things collided and made me the saddest person I've ever been. Sad and broken and frightened, like twitchy, like proper, you know, that there's a saying that you can't do right for doing wrong, and that's how I felt within this period. It was a period between 2008 and 2010, and but I tell you now, it was only 2 years, but it took me probably 6 years to get over it. More, maybe more, you know, if I'm honest. So
at this point, then, you mentioned the fact you weren't really seeing your horses. So what was happening with the horses at this point? Because obviously you had the money for them, you had the farm, you know, were you competing? Were you doing much? What was kind of going on then? Yeah, no, crazy,
they were just at home. Yeah, they were just at home. That was it. And Brendan used to muck them out. And because I was so fragile and I was working all over the country, he used to drive me to the train station. So if I was going to London, he'd drive me to Stafford. If I was going north or to an airport, he would drive me to Stoke. And every morning it was as if I was going off to China. So people used to see us at the train station, and it was as if, you know, it was like I was going off for a month's, you know, kind of tour somewhere, because it was like that. Every day was like that. Every day was like stepping into an expedition of mind over matter, and one foot in front of the other, and trying to keep your head down out of the firing line. And because you have to bear in mind, I started this job in 2008, and so that was May the 1st, and within weeks Lehman Brothers collapsed. The banking, I mean, the biggest global banking crisis that we'll ever see. And suddenly this business that relied on the development of houses, it was a nightmare. But the funny thing is that when I was asked to join the business, they asked me to join as a partner, which would have made me self-employed. And by a real quirk of fate, which nearly made me not join, was that they refused to take me on as a partner. So they then took me on as an employee. So they took me on as an employee. Yeah, you can see where I'm going. So they took me on as an employee, and on basically a partner's salary.
Brilliant.
But
so
then,
tell us more then.
So then the other side to that is that when they needed to lose money off the balance sheet, suddenly all the partners started to disappear because they were self-employed, and they could just be gone like that, you know, one day. And they were good to them. Don't get me wrong. They were good to them. But I was a different kettle of fish. I was the only one in this global business that they couldn't just go, right, see ya, here's a bit of money, bye. So it became an HR nightmare for them, I suppose, is the best way of describing it. And the stress that everybody was under at that time was so significant. People were fighting for their jobs, their lives, their livelihoods. People that had been used to huge salaries were worrying that they were going to be next. And many of them, I worked for a couple of partners who could have been next. As it happened, they weren't. And it kind of brings out the worst in folks sometimes, and I ended up in a situation where, rather than somebody just say to me, look, we need to get, what would be probably, a couple 100,000 off the balance sheet all told, can we have a sensible conversation with you, and manage your exit away? And I would have said yes, because I was totally broken by this point. But they didn't do that. What they did was that they did, the kind of rubbish way, which is to try and make you feel like you're so rubbish at your job that, you can't achieve. And my income target in this declining market kept increasing. It was like 750,000 for the year. Achieved that. Went back in. £1 million, achieved that, went back in, £10 million, totally could not achieve that. So, whatever I did, I couldn't achieve that. So it was all that kind of ebbing away at your confidence. So I'd gone from this huge ego and huge amount of confidence in myself to suddenly going, oh my God, I can't do anything about this. And it was hard. It was like seeing a different version of myself that I then I was also this kind of free falling out of control. And it was almost, I don't think they designed it to be like this, because I wouldn't like to think that anybody would be so horrid, really. But they sort of were trying to chip away at me so that I would leave. And I did try and leave, and I did get interviews, but I wasn't performing on all cylinders. So it wasn't a good time. So I started to realise what was happening. So I managed to get some help from an employment lawyer, and I tracked what was happening for 6 months. So now, if anybody is out there that is doing that or has done that, it is such hard work, emotionally, physically, because you have to literally contemporaneously note everything that's said to you at any possible given time. But it is so important, and if you are in this situation, do it, and do it well, and date, time, sign everything, because it is so important. And the culmination of this is, actually it would have been a job that I would have quite liked had the circumstances have been different, but the business was in stress because of this banking crisis. And I'd got enough evidence at this point that I was sat down at a desk and told that HR were going to come in, and I wasn't performing, and I wouldn't perform, and they were going to bring HR in to discuss basically, I suppose, sacking me, I would imagine. We didn't really get to that point in the conversation. And I literally sat there because I had a pre-written letter in my bag, which I'd developed with my lawyer. And I sat, it was a weird management structure. I worked for a lady partner, and I also worked for a chap who, she was like sector, he was location, and it was a bit of a weird matrix structure, as these things often are. And so I sat with the chap, and he said all this stuff about HR, and I literally just sat there and I just said, this stops today. And he had no clue. He just looked at me and he went, you what? And I said, it stops today. I said, I'm telling you, it stops today. And he said, I don't know what you're on about. I said, this is just all, dreadful what's happening here. I said, and actually, I've got enough evidence to have a grievance, and that's what I'll do. And he said, you haven't got enough evidence. I said, actually, my lawyer and I believe that we have. I won't go into the detail of it at all, but and I just said to him, look, I said, I'm not going to stay here any longer. What my suggestion to you is that you get on the phone to London, you get on the phone to HR director, and you come up with an agreement, and then we can all walk away and be happy with that decision. And I literally stood up in that meeting, and I walked out, and I walked straight out of the office. I walked straight to the station, and I jumped on the next train home. And ever since that moment, this train ticket, where is it? Has been in my purse, and it's a train ticket that's dated on that day, and that was my journey home train ticket. And I've never been so frightened in my whole life.
Okay.
But
I'm going to pause you there again, because we've hit another pivotal moment. So what was it in you that meant that, like you say, you've never been frightened in your life? It's a really scary thing to do, but there was something in you that knew that you knew you had to, like you were going to leave everything you knew, all of the security, everything, but you just knew you had to do it. What was going on for you?
It was going to kill me. Honestly, it was going to kill me. And that's not too emotional a thing to say. I was a woman on the edge. I'd suffered a miscarriage a few months previous. The woman that I worked for was also was in a failing marriage, same age as me, well, a little bit older, failing marriage, wanted to have a family. So I would imagine at the time she found it very difficult to see me in a very positive marriage, even though things were difficult at work. I would imagine she found it difficult to see that we were trying for a baby, even though it hadn't worked out at that point. So I think for her, you know, she found it really hard, but I knew it was going to kill me. I was going to end up having a massive breakdown. Well, I don't know that, but you know, I assume my blood pressure was through the roof. It's the only time in the 20 years I've been with Brendan that we've ever really rowed. You know, we bicker a lot. We're always bickering at each other, but yeah, it was incredibly difficult, but I knew I had to do it. And actually what's interesting is that my husband's quite a stealthy kind of character. So behind the scenes of all this, he'd obviously, well, clearly had picked up the things weren't right. You know, him driving me to the station every day and kind of waving me off like I was going on a cruise, you know, so, well, into war, probably more than a cruise. And he'd started to look at ideas about how we could use the farm differently. And his sister works as a learning disability nurse, and she'd always said to us, oh, you know, it'd be brilliant to bring our they call them service users out to the farm. They'd love it, seeing the animals and the horses and stuff, and just being out in the fresh air. So Brendan had started to develop this idea about, it was known at the time as, I think it still is known as, care farming or social farming. And so you use your assets in a different way. Now, the irony to this is that my job in this management consultancy was to work with clients to use their physical assets in a different way and to leverage what they had to increase their income. But I couldn't see it in my own assets at all. And I remember the day Brendan spoke to me about it, and I was quite terse with him, really. I was like, no, the farm's my sanctuary. It's where I go. Nobody's coming on that farm. This is my safe space, blah, blah, blah. Went on and on. Anyway, he continued behind the scenes while I was in the last throes of this job. So before I'd finished. So by the time I'd finished, we'd got this fairly concrete idea. I was kind of on board. I really wasn't massively on board, and if he'd have jacked it in, I would have been fine with that. But he carried on, and he's quite, as I say, stealthy and quite quiet, and he just kept his hand on the rudder, as it were, and or on the tiller, whatever it is, you know, and he kept going with this idea and building up the business plan and building up his contacts and his ideas. And Brendan's really good at that, and that's where we work really well together as a team. So by the time I finished work and I walked out, I had about a month where I was just in bits and couldn't really do very much. And interestingly, at the time, and I know we've talked about this before, Jenny, I couldn't remember stuff. So that was the other thing, is if you're in the middle of this kind of situation now, one of the big things that you'll recognize is that you forget things, and you forget meetings, you forget to take things to meetings, you know, and then you beat yourself up that you forgot, and then you panic about it, and you know, there's all those feelings. So I had about a month where I didn't really do very much at all. I was but Brendan carried on quietly, and then suddenly I emerged, and I needed something. I was no way recovered, but I needed something to focus on, and that's when I'm at my best. So I literally grabbed hold of this new business, Sherratt's Wood CIC, we decided to call it, because we own a bit of a wood called Sherratt's Wood, and we built this business from nothing to have people with learning disabilities come onto our farm, undertake activities to help them become more independent. We knew nothing about what we were doing, but with that came the so what test. So we were able to say, well, why would you do it like that? Why have you done it like that for years? You know, actually, this seems to work better. And so we didn't have the baggage of having worked in that sector previously. But because we can run a business, we were able to just push it forward. and it took longer than you expect, you know, to get it going, but it soon started to gain some traction, you know.
Yeah, and I think it's so many people, and your story's so similar to mine. It's got so many similarities, and we knew this, and in fact, I think that's why you connected with me in the first place. You said I listened to your story and thought you've been through the same thing. Now, so many people think though that you leave something and then suddenly you start up something else that's really successful, because that's what they see, isn't it? But you need time to recover. You need time to work out what it is that you do want. You have to ask some hard questions. You know, when you were going through that time, and bless him, Brendan was just, like you say, hand on the tiller. He was there with you. You do need that support, don't you? That is a huge part of this. And for some people, actually, that support comes perhaps from the horses. It might come from family. It may come from friends, mentors, anything like that. But you need some stability, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. And also, I'd have never have come up with that idea, never in a million years, because I just don't think like that. I can pick something up and run with it and make it a success, but I'm not the idea generator. And but that's why we work so well together, you know. So but no, I mean, and to be fair, it took probably 3 years for the business to take off. In the end, the irony of it is that so we kind of carried on, and then in so that was 2010, and then by May 2011, I was pregnant, and so we started this business, and so then I was sort of working through developing the business. We've got this very small scale activity of people coming onto the farm, and it was small scale. It didn't pay the bills, but you know, and Brendan would use. We had this one minibus that we'd managed to get a grant for. He'd drive all the local young farmers to all the balls and the discos for 100 quid in the pocket, and I'd, you know, then we'd go to Aldi and we'd work out and it was like a sport trying to shop on no money. And actually, I think very fondly of those times. And actually, we got to the point where we'd been asked to transfer a service from the NHS that was closing. Well, we'd heard it was closing, and so we got in touch. We'd heard it in the paper. So we got in touch with the NHS and the council and said, look, can we not do anything with this service? Can we not transfer it? And we managed to pull together a business plan which attracted a significant amount of funding for this service, and we cheapied the staff over. And I remember sitting in this meeting really heavily pregnant, and I said to the NHS guys, I said, look, so it's all well and good for you. You're all sat here getting paid. I said, we're not getting paid. And actually, we've got no money. And, you know, got all these ideas and we can make it work. And weirdly, there was somebody sat in this meeting, and he rang me the next day and he said, I've managed to find you £3,500 a month. I went, you what? And he said, yeah, he says, I've managed to find you £3,500 a month, like a consultancy fee to get this service transferred. Now, who in the right mind would ever do that, really? You know, because we were taking on the service, but I think they knew that we were at the point of, not that I could have gone and got a job probably because I was, you know, hugely pregnant at the time, but and again, that was difficult emotionally, because I would always been the person that could go and get a job. I always go, I'll get a job anywhere. I still say it now. I say it to the staff. You know, if I need to, I'll go to Tesco's. I'll go anywhere. No job is too little or too big for me. I'd just go. Although Prime Minister these days, probably. I certainly haven't got the ego that I had back in the day.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you. Actually, was the interesting thing was you went from all this money headed for the penny plate. Yeah. The ego was there. And then you're now telling us of a time when you had to, you know, add up as you went around the supermarket. You had to scrape and what have you, and you had to sit in meetings and say to people, we've got no money. Like, what was that like? Because that is the other end of ego, isn't it?
It was like a sport. It's actually, funnily and weirdly, quite enjoyable. That simplicity, it is really strange, and you don't want to be in it. You don't want to be in it when you're in it, but when you look back on it, you have very fond memories about how you got through it. Because when I'd left my job, you know, there was a finite amount of money that was left, you know, and we'd taken a mortgage holiday. And at the point where we had this meeting with the NHS, I suppose I was desperate, because I knew next month we'd got this big mortgage to go out, and I had no money. And we were at the point where I said to Brendan, we could lose it all. We could lose everything. But by that point, I was so wedded to this business plan and this idea and the concept of what we were doing that I knew it would be okay. So we carried on. And to be fair, I think sometimes you've got to get to the bottom. So although I thought I'd got to the bottom, when my corporate career crashed around my ears, in lots of ways, that was just one bottom. There are other bottoms.
There are so many bottoms. You've got to reach them all.
Yeah, and they're different, and I mean, the trauma of that corporate experience has stayed with me. Well, we met. Our first conversation when we met, you asked me about it, and I could be back in that emotion within an instant. And I remember I cried to you, and actually through the work that we've done together, now I can talk about it very openly. And if I allowed myself, the emotion is still there, but I don't need that now. It doesn't, I don't need that to salve the feelings or anything. So, but no, we had to get to the bottom of the barrel, and then we just never looked back. Really, it just grew and grew and grew, and we're now turning over nearly £1 million a year from nothing. We've got about nearly 20 staff who are absolutely awesome. We're just about to go into, we've bought properties to do supported living for our customers, because we don't call them service users, we call them customers. They are, it's a retail situation. They choose to come to us, and they could choose not to. So I say to the staff, it's up to us to make it what they want it to be. And, and we work really hard to do that. And we're really well known locally for, to be fair, I've spoken on national stages about what we do, and it's one of the reasons I mentioned care farming earlier, or social farming, you might hear of it. We stepped away from that many years ago, and I've been very vocal about it, because a lot of people who run proper commercial farms were being encouraged to get people onto their farms with learning disabilities as an income generator. And now my view remains firm that if you're working with the most vulnerable people in society, that should be your core business, and you should take it so seriously, so very seriously, that you operate to the standards of the Care Quality Commission as best you can. It's an unregulated sector that we work in currently, which is frightening, absolutely frightening. So I talk a lot, and I know we have been mentioned at Westminster before, and we're really held up as a beacon of good practice of what we do. It doesn't mean that the fight's over. I've actually got a big meeting tomorrow with the commissioners at our local authority, because they want to slash our fees. And I said to them, you've no idea what it costs to run a business and to employ a member of staff to support people for 6 hours a day. It's not just those 6 hours, it's everything that fits around them, it's managing them, it's every aspect of that, their pension. So I've got a huge meeting, because if they continue along this line, then actually our business will be adversely affected to the point we'll end up paying them to look after the people. So we're constantly fighting the fight, but it's from a different setup, and it will work out, because social care reform is on the agenda, and our MP has picked it up now, and it has to happen. It's got to happen. Social care reform's got to happen, and we will be there when it does. Whereas we've set up a sustainable business, we're robust, we're financially secure. But obviously you can't do that forever, because you've got to have the income to support that.
So how incredible that you're now absolutely out there fighting for something that would never have particularly interested you years ago, and wasn't something that
and this absolutely, I love it. I found myself in social care by accident, and it is an absolute passion of mine to help make a difference to people's lives and see them become independent. So much so that we have quite a strange business model, in that we work with people to become more independent, and then we back off the amount of support we provide, which makes them cheaper. Now, most businesses continue to disable people because they can't cope with that business model, because basically you're going, last year I saved the local authority nearly £50,000, but I had to redeploy 2 members of staff. Now, we did it, but that's difficult, but that's my job is to deal with that. My customer's job is to get as independent as they can be, so they don't need that help. And that, but the flip side to it is that I have now got a significant amount of flexibility. So from all those years ago where it was money, we live a simpler life now. And yes, we're not scraping by at Aldi unless we want to go to Aldi. We're not having to go to the giveaway section at Tesco or whatever, but it is a simpler life. it affords me so much more time. So suddenly now I've got these horses and I'm out competing. I disappear off on Thursday for 4 days, going down to the Midway Championships at Hartbury, and I found my passion for dressage, and I'm able to pursue it. And I've bred some fantastic horses that we're out competing out at medium, working at advanced at home, and so I've got a real nice balance now. It's lovely.
Which is perfect, because I wanted to bring you on to the horsey element of it now. So tell us then what has changed as a result of, you know, designing a life and building a business and doing that around a very different set of values to just the money and the ego. What's happened from your riding perspective and from that side of things because of doing that? Well,
I used to ride, I suppose, a bit angry, I suppose, is the best way of describing it. So again, it was that whole thing of, you know, making things happen. And I remember Brendan saying, I don't enjoy watching you ride. This is years ago. And I was like, oh God, well, you know, what? And he says, well, you're just always so bloody annoyed. And actually what I've learned, you know, in recent years, and because my personality is settled, I suppose, and I'm not as manic as I used to be. I'm not as egocentric as I used to be. That now I realise that actually with horses, it's about chipping away. It's consistent training. It's having the right people around you. So again, my Brendan, for my 40th birthday, without me knowing, booked me to go to AM Dressage in Gloucester on what they used to do, these weekend training camps. And I was like, oh, I cried when I opened it because it was so unexpected. And but the only horse I'd got at the time was one I did bloodhounding on. So I was like, oh God, you know, it's not going to go well. I'm going to look like a wally, and you know, all the rest of it. So anyway, off I went and tootled off. I'm very good at doing things on my own. I suppose, was it soloist or something? I think you said is one of the character traits of people. Yeah. So much so that I remember saying to Brendan and being very upset that when I had my son Busby, I said, you don't need to be there, be fine. Right? Because actually for me, I like to get into a situation and deal with it and be focused on it. And that's anything. That's whether I've got to write a report. And in lots of ways, I've had to learn to take feedback. Because actually I never used to need that, but that's wrong, because you can always improve on what you've done. Yeah, so off I went to AM Dressage, and we did the assessment ride in the morning. And I remember this horse was a very opinionated red horse, and I thought, oh God, you're just making me look like a dick, you know, in my mind, obviously. And at this point, one of the trainers, Justine Soul, stepped out into the arena, and she said, right, just calm down, do this, do that, do the other. And then suddenly we were like transformed into these dressage, you know, combination. And so for the next few days, I trained solely with Justine. And at the end of the course, she said to me, I want to carry on training you. I'm going to drive to you. And I've seen her basically every week for the past 5 years. And I spend time down in Gloucester. I've bought different horses in that we've bred over the years. So one of the horses I've got at the moment is actually related to one of the first horses that I bought with my dad's inheritance. And she's in foal for next year. And as I say, I've trained with Justine. I've learned so much, but my brain is open to it now. And I've also got the time and the flexibility. So after this session now, I'll go out and I'll ride. You know, and then I'll come back into the office and do some work. And that's how it rolls for me, really. That's how my life works.
Wow. Wow. So we've been on a real journey with you through that story. And what do you think are the key kind of themes that you'd love to be able to share with people, and the key messages you'd love to really be able to give to them if anyone's thinking, God, I'm in that right now, any of that story?
Well, I mean, you don't need to feel like you've got to boil the ocean. Please don't do that, because it's impossible. Everything is about chipping away. But choose something that sets your soul on fire. Please do that. If I can say that to anybody. Now, you might not know what it is, but go and expose yourself to stuff. Be open-minded. If I hadn't have been open-minded to Brendan's idea, and his idea was born of desperation to save me. So, you know, if I hadn't been open-minded, we certainly wouldn't be doing what we are now. But what we do now sets my soul and my heart on fire. It is absolutely the most amazing, rewarding job that I could possibly do. Now, it isn't for everybody, but there must be something out there that does it for you. I still am, motivated by money. That is ingrained in me, and I'm still motivated by working hard. The problem that I have is that I expect everybody to be like me, and of course they're not. So over the years, that's taken a lot of kind of skill and to understand that everyone's got a different motivation and a different way of achieving the same outcome. But I think you've got to decide what it is that you want to achieve, and then you've got to find your group of people that help you to do that. So I've talked a lot about my husband. I've talked about my dressage trainer, who probably would never even know how much she's helped me to, because the skills are transferable. All those things about being relaxed and open-minded and just taking small steps actually are so transferable to every aspect of your life professionally as well. And also just the therapy of being able to ride regularly, because you never feel as good as when you're in a lesson with your trainer, let's face it, because you always come out of that lesson feeling absolutely fantastic. Well, if you don't, change your trainer. That's the other thing I'd say. If you don't change, I've had lots of trainers over the years that have bobbed in and out, and I've had some where I've come out crying every time, feeling useless. So in terms of horses, guys, if you're coming out feeling useless, go and find somebody else, because you should come out not with smoke blown up your posterior, but feeling empowered, knowing what your next steps are, and feeling that they're achievable, and also that you're able to contact that person if you're struggling. And when you find that person, it really makes such a difference. So be clear on what it is that you want to achieve, your end goal, and then work out how you're going to do it. And if you can find something that you love to achieve that, then blink it out, just do that. Goodness, I couldn't give you any more advice.
And so just really quickly to touch on, because we've worked together, what were some of the things that we've worked on that have really helped you in the past probably year, I think, actually?
Definitely some of the kind of work on the trauma of the corporate career, that was really holding me back. I think it was giving, there were remnants of it that were making me very anxious. Now, I'm not, I haven't got an issue with anxiety or depression, but because I believe that a lot of what I feel is normal ups and downs of life, and to a degree, you've got to, it's normal to feel, but you've got to be able to get out of it. And it's when you can't get out of it that's when there's an issue, and obviously then you need to go and get more help. And I've never been at that point, but we did a lot of work on the trauma of that, and that. To be honest, after the sessions on that, I thought, oh, it's never going to work. That isn't, kind of, I can't believe it. But actually, subconsciously, it's had a massive impact on me. And also just not always having to push everything, because I'm very much, make it happen now. It's got to happen now. And actually, it's okay not to do that. That's come through quite a lot in terms of the coaching, and also just working out little skills. So one of the things that I really struggled with after all of these experiences was remembering my dressage test. And in fact, that was the first, when I contacted Jenny to have some coaching, it was the first thing I said. Actually, that all the other stuff I'd kind of wasn't the focus. The focus on, tell me how I can remember these dressage tests. And actually what I've worked out now is there are ways that you can do it, and it obviously depends on who you are and how you think and how you learn and all those sort of things, but I found my system, and it works, and actually now I've enjoyed success going out. I was third at my local area festivals, recently at Medium, hoping for a wild card, fingers crossed. But you do start to realize that, and I realized, without it being ego, to believe in myself again, but with not with the ego leading it, just knowing that I'm okay, I'm all right. And also the most important thing is to be happy.
Yes.
Absolutely, to be happy. Yeah.
And one of the things I know we touched on was this identity piece around, but I'm not a dressage rider and I'm not on dressage horses. I've bred them myself, who am I to be there? I'm an imposter, this isn't my thing. I'm not a pro, all of that stuff. And there you are now, actually holding your own at things and doing well, and actually now on podiums, basically. Just really briefly, what was it that kind of really clicked and really worked with you to kind of bring that about? Because it's no wonder it was connected back to the old corporate stuff, and there you are where you are.
I haven't got a straight answer really, I suppose. It was massively a protection aspect, and I'd realised when we started to go through it that I'd started to do that in the corporate job about 6 months before I left. I'd say things like, well, I've only been here 2 years, so I don't know. You know, you're like, really? But and so I carried on like that, going like, oh, you know, well, I haven't really got a dressage horse, and I'm not a dressage rider, and I'm not a this, and it was all about making everything feel a bit smaller so that it wasn't as exposed, and the expectation wasn't as high, and the judgment wouldn't be as much from others. But I don't know, really. I think just all the work you've done, there isn't one single thing, but all the work you've helped me with has made me just go, do you know what? I don't care. I don't care. We're out here. We're doing it. I've paid my money. I'm giving it a go. And the only slight demoralising thing is that because I don't have, you know, a classic dressage horse, my horses are all got kind of Irish breeding in them somewhere, so they don't move naturally. Like, so you get to a level like medium, and suddenly, you know, he can go through a test without really making a mistake, but he'll never get the marks of the other horses because they move in a different way. And they could make it happened actually at the areas last week. You know, the person who came second broke in the medium trots, but because everything else just looks so ace, because her horse is ace, you know, that's just the way it is. But now I'm starting to think, well, actually, what do I need for the future? And actually, I want to go Grand Prix. Going to go Grand Prix. And actually, am I happy to go Grand Prix and not be competitive in any way? No, not really. So I'm actually starting to think about what horse I need next. And that was part of the breeding decision with my mare. So she's in foal to Branduardi's, Hanoverian, and just trying to get the future of where I want to be, because, you know, it's important to me, and my sport really is important to me, and I'm lucky enough to have a husband that massively supports my independence and my going off and riding, because he knows I just need to go away for a week every couple of months and not have to speak to anybody and just be with my horses, and then I come back and I'm refreshed. And, you know, and my son knows that as well. He's 9 now, and he knows that that's what mum does. Mum has to go away for a bit and then come back. So, and then I'm at my best.
Amazing. So you've just found your flow. You've found what it is that you need. You've got those around you that support you. You've got your plan and your goal, but you're also, I'm very much getting this sense of things take time, but it doesn't mean you're not going to push. So it's not sitting there and going, oh, it's all going to happen to me.
Oh, no, yeah.
You've got to
want to work hard.
You haven't got to push sand up a hill, you know?
It's instead of making it happen, it's working through it methodically and being diligent and being committed to it. And that to me is different than this whole kind of slightly hysterical making thing, you know, like it's got to happen now, and almost getting frustrated that things don't happen at the speed you want. You've got to just slow it down. You've got to chip away at it, you know, and that's what all horse riding's about, but actually that's what professional life is about as well, you know. So
it's so easy, isn't it, when we see the results of someone else and we think, I want that and I want it now, and we think it must have been easy for them, and you know, that's half of the problem, isn't it, when we look at someone else's and think, well, you're still looking at penny 1 and 2, you know, but you know you'll get to penny 1 and 2, there's no doubt, but actually you don't just suddenly get it.
Well, I had a bit of an epiphany in that I was looking at on British Dressage at some people's scores who I thought had got you know, huge amount of points and had ridden to, you know, much higher level than me, and then suddenly I went, oh God, I've got more than they have. And suddenly that was the point where I was like, well, I am a dressage rider. Actually, I am at a level that, because it's easy to make assumptions about people, and you know, and Penny might have been a right cow, you know, you never know, do you? And actually, I'd like to think that I'm all right.
Something awful, you know.
Well, Penny
might have been some drugs baron. Who knows?
yeah. Well, also Penny might have just been given that by her family, which is fine. You're still going to work hard, you know, in terms of training a horse and all that stuff. But the other side to me is I'm incredibly independent. And you know, everything I've got is because Brendan and I have worked hard for it and got it. We met and lived in a terraced house. You know, we haven't been given anything on a plate. Everything we've got, literally, I look out and I take tremendous pleasure and satisfaction to know that it's ours, and nobody can go, but I gave you that bit of inheritance, or I gave you the money for that, or no, none of that, it's mine. And and I love it.
That's amazing. Okay, so to finish off then, I don't think Penny 1 and 2 would be the right registration for you anyway. What's it going to be?
No. I don't know. I'm not really that fussed about it, to be fair. Things like that, cars and stuff don't really bother me anymore. Now, if we're talking like a kind of decent horse and a new lorry, then yeah. but but no, I'm happy. You know, I've got what I want, and the new lorry will be coming hopefully in the next 12 months. So
there's no doubt some lovely living in it for when you go away, 'cause you do.
Yeah, go away a lot. And I've had a lorry that has only got day living, and I've had to get on with that. But you just get on with it. So it isn't all, I'm still making sacrifices, and that sounds a bit trite really, because I'll get to go away with my horses and that's a sacrifice, but I haven't got the pop out and the and the shower and the toilet and all those lovely things. I camp in my lorry, and but actually the satisfaction I get from it is as much as anything else, so it doesn't matter to me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It's been absolutely brilliant hearing your story, and I'm sure there are lots of people watching and listening in that have had moments where they think, oh, I'm there, or I was there, or yeah, that resonates with me. And if they want to follow what you're up to, do you have anywhere where you sort of post things, or are you quite private with it all?
I've got my private Facebook page, but anybody that's linked to you, I'm happy to link in with. So feel free to friend request me. In terms of our business, we've got the website, which is sherrattswood.com, and then we've also got a Facebook page for the business at Sherrattswood. So so have a look on there, and I would imagine that maybe people that watch this that might have an interest in doing something similar to us. As long as you're not in Staffordshire, I'm happy to talk to you.
Awesome. Love it. Yeah. It's not a competition, then it's absolutely fine. Awesome.
I'm still fiercely competitive.
And fair enough, because you've got to look after your castle, haven't you? It's really important.
Protect it. I've got 20 people's livelihoods that sit on my shoulders, and I take it tremendously seriously.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Louise. It's been absolutely lovely chatting to you and hearing some parts of your story that I've never heard, because actually we don't go into story really when we do stuff. So it's interesting to hear the back of it and know that you can tell that, like you say, without being overwhelmed, without reliving it, but just tell it that the story that it was. So it just shows how far you've come. So thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I will no doubt speak to you soon.
Take care.
Bye.